Welcome everybody to the International Drag King Community Extravaganza Going Global. I'm just going to go over a little housekeeping tips for the webinar here. All audio and video is muted for all attendees. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll go over those at the end. And chat can be used for just general comments and discussion amongst yourselves. And today's session is being recorded for future viewing. And I will hand it over to Mara Fraser.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming to our International Drag King Community Extravaganza Glowing Global event. I am Mara Fraser. As Anne said, I'm the curator of the Dance and Movement collections here at the Lawrence and Lee Theater Research Institute, Thompson Library Special Collections at The Ohio State University. And I am so glad you've joined us. This series of conversations has been so much fun, and I have learned so much, and I think that will just continue today. But before I turn over the conversation to Beth and our wonderful panelists, and hopefully to lots of people jumping into the chat as well and the Q&A, I would like to share a little bit about today, going back to our Performing Gender collection here at the Theater Research Institute. So a little bit about the Performing Gender collection and what I found for you there this week. So the Performing Gender collection, the last time we visited this, we looked at a really old photograph of a pants performer, but today we have Julia Applegate performing as Jake, and that's the image on the side of the screen there. But this collection does date from around 1857 to the present. It's got all kinds of riches of programs, posters, photographs, ephemera, and more, including several photos and folders, really a lot of information from the original Drag King Conference and IDKE, the first few years of that. I think it was, from what I can tell from a quick cursory glance through things, it was in Columbus at first and then took off, and also from his kings. So here's a few other images. You can see this also in one of our panelists' backgrounds today. On the left, we have the Ohio Kings license. From what I can tell, this was maybe used as an event flyer, something to hand out. Am I right? Okay. And his King's calendar of events, including we talked about in our first event, the Kings Island event, some really fun things there. So I thought I would pull those out. We also, as I mentioned, we have stuff on the IDKE, and this is just the tiniest sample. I'm hoping to catch your interest. If you want to see some more of these archives, please come in. We're open for research. But on the left, we have a poster, an image of a poster, and this is big. It's big-ish. It's 11 by 17, so you can get in there and see. And if you're a Columbus local, like I am, at least since my college days, you can see a lot of the businesses of the Short North, that some of them aren't there anymore, that supported the first international Drag King extravaganza. So that's a poster for the event. And then we have a group photo. It's a little tiny. This is from the back, the record of who's in the photo, but it's his Kings. Oh, it's actually his Kings. It's maybe not from the IDKE, but the back row, we have Leanne, Max, Duke, Jay, Derek, Mel, and Rock. The middle row, Johnny, Lusty, and David. The bottom row, Aaron, Toby, Jake, and Becky. And the photo is by Helen Harris. So those are just a few fun things I wanted to share with you. And as I mentioned, this collection is open for research, and there's a lot more on all kinds of performances of gender. So if you would like to find out more, please contact us. I have the contact information for Beth, who will be taking this event away here soon, the curator of the Theater Research Institute, and for myself, the curator of the Dance and Movement collections here. And so you can email us with any questions that you have. There's so much more to come check out, so please do. And so now, without wasting any more time, I will turn this over to Beth Cattleman and to our amazing panel. And I hope that you enjoy our event today, and thank you for coming.
Thanks so much, Mara. I'm really thrilled to be here today. This is such a great panel. It's been a wonderful series. We're finishing out our trilogy, and I think we may have to schedule some more events like this because it's been just so much fun. My name is Beth Cattleman. I'm the curator of the Jerem Lawrence and Robert E. Lee Theater Research Institute here, and I've got some wonderful guests with me today. What I'm going to do is ask them to just introduce themselves briefly. I'm going to go around just the way you're showing on my screen. If you could just give us a couple of sentences or two about who you are, where you are at this point, and also then we'll get into more detail about how you got connected with the drag kings and drag king culture. Heidi, if you would go first.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heidi Madsen, aka Toby. Was in the beginning of His Kings when came in a little bit after it started and said, hey, you guys need to be more organized. So I came in and helped organize and perform. Today, so being a drag king for over 25 years and a performance artist, I am now using those skills and also as a professional clown to help children. We run a children's art group called the Super Art League, my partner and I and another friend of ours today here.
Great, thank you, Heidi. Donna, you're up.
Hi everyone, I'm Donna Troca. I started performing in His Kings in, I think, 1997. I was DJ Love. And then in 1999, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and that's where I'm at now. I work at Emory University.
Thank you. Shawnee.
Hello, I'm Shawnee Avery Scott, aka Maxwell, the Balladeer. I am now currently in Chicagoland, in the far west suburbs, and I'm a learning and development specialist. So that's kind of what I do now. I still am known to think of choreography for songs that come out. So it's just ingrained.
Great, thank you. Luster, hello.
Hello. I'm Lester Singleton, also known as Lester and Lascivious de la Vergion. I am in Columbus, and I still am known to host MC something now and then, maybe perform here and there. And I do outreach to, I do HIV and STI outreach to people of color who also identify as transgender, gender non-conforming, and non-binary for the city of Columbus.
Great, thank you. And Jen Rose, thanks for joining us today.
Hey there, I'm Jen Rose Fitzgerald, and I didn't have anything to do with organizing or performing, but I was part of the King's Court and the biggest fan of the Kings, and really watched this conference happen and excited to hear people talk. I currently live in St. Louis, where I work at the Social Policy Institute at Washington University in St. Louis.
This is great. Thanks so much, Jen Rose. And I think it's important to have, the audience and the King's Court perspective as well, because we've come through the series now, and we first talked about the HIS Kings, and then we talked about the King's Court, and then, of course, we're going to talk about the IDKE, International Drag King Extravaganza. And it might help just a little bit, I guess, as we go through to kind of lay out for the folks who may not be familiar with kind of what each one of those things are. So let's just kind of briefly start before we get to IDKE. Start again just with a brief intro on what the HIS Kings or the His Kings was.
His Kings was a group of folks who like to perform masculinity to their favorite music for the thrill of the crowd, often making social commentary for the time. And I would say that, then it would have been fair to say that we were trying to expand the notion of what it might mean to be lesbian, and at least a non-conforming female body person.
Sure.
I'll say that. And
Great.
so we started out of a birthday party and exploded into a thing. And we didn't know we needed it. And we certainly, we suspected that the people who came might have needed something, but we didn't know what it was and that we had it.
Well, I'll let everybody know too that we do have a webinar up specifically about the His Kings, so please do check that out. And I'm going to throw the next one then to you, Jen Rhodes. Can you just briefly mention what the King's Court was?
Yeah, well, the King's Court was, I would say, a loyal group of fans, followers, and helpers who was there supporting the Kings from anything from helping with costumes to security to anything, promotion to whatever. And the King's Court was their way of giving us something back by making us officially a part of it in a different way. And sometimes allowing us, for example, to have reserved seating so that we knew that we could, if we traveled to another city to go see a show, that we would be able to have a good seat, and also that people could feel the energy from the regulars and out of town gigs and stuff like that. So that's my understanding of King's Court. That's how I explain it.
Fantastic, and this is perfect timing. Before we launch into the IDKE part of this, we've had Julie Applegate, who is showing up. There we go. It's, thanks, Julie, for going through and finally getting a chance to pop in here. Can you just take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Julie. I use she pronouns. I helped found IDKE and His Kings, and I was pictured earlier with much less gray hair and a pained look on my face. So,
fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you for helping put on this wonderful trilogy and the series for us. So let me open it up then as far as let's move into the IDKE. And if somebody can talk a little bit about how that got started and just what was it and how you were able to take that drag king culture from here in the Midwest and Columbus and make it a much broader international phenomenon. So Heidi, did you want to pick that up on that one?
I like to say it happened in spite of me, actually. So Julie and Donna had this awesome idea, right? Let's put on this giant 3-day weekend of performances in addition to partnering with academia at Ohio State University. Oh, and by the way, we have to do this in what I felt like, I mean, this is my memory now, how many years later, but it felt like it was just around the corner. Maybe we had a couple months to do it. We had never done anything on that scale. And I said, I'm in charge of the money. I need to see a proposal. Right. And then when I saw the proposal, I'm like, we're never going to get this done in time. So with that, I'll hand it off to Julie or Donna to tell us what exactly was in the proposal.
Yeah, I didn't remember the money part when we did our little run through yesterday, so I can't say that my brain is the most reliable, and maybe Shawnee has some ideas too. But I think really what it was about is, you know, a number of us that were in His Kings were also getting masters in women's studies at the Ohio State University, and a lot of us were studying queer theory, gender theory, race theory, and so the work, and we saw this as political work. And what we were seeing out in the world is we were slowly starting to see some academic work about drag kings and the performance of masculinity, and none of it was representing what we were doing in Columbus. And also, once we kind of got our sea legs, we started traveling around the region, and we started to see that there was drag happening, you know, in a lot of other places that weren't being reported on. And so I think for us, we wanted to create an event that brought people, I mean, I don't know, I know that probably Julie and Lester and Shawnee and Heidi were thinking bigger than I was. I was just excited, like if they were like in the tri-state area, and it ended up being more than that. And I think for me, the parts that were really important to just celebrate what we were doing and what other people were doing, and just like for folks to meet each other and to kind of get to like work with one another and brainstorm on things. And so what was important to me is I didn't want it to be a competition. I wanted it to be a celebration. And I was most interested in the academic conference part because I knew that there were people doing research and writing about it. And, they were either doing it like at a history conference or at like a women's studies conference. And so I wanted to bring folks together, at this event so that we had both kind of performance and kind of more academic, or probably what I would call now public scholarship about what was happening.
I don't know. I would
What
like
do you
to jump
remember,
in. Well, my memory is worse than yours, so I'm gonna be going off of you guys. But I kind of want to jump in the feeling the need part that Lester mentioned. I know when I fell in love with His Kings, I think I went to the second show, and I was floored because here are people doing the same thing that I did, that I thought I was the only one to do. I used to get my mom's makeup, put on my mascara, mustache, and do my choreography to Hall & Oates and all these different Michael Jackson, like all these different people, and I was like, I thought I was the only one that did that. So fast forward many years, and I see this group, and I'm like, this is amazing. They became my family. I found a home basically, and it felt so good, especially to be validated, two, to understand that yes, there are people out there. We're all different, but in one core sense, we're all the same, and that was pretty amazing to me. I was not part of the OSU Women's Studies crew, but I was, I definitely learned a lot, and I was more interested in bringing those other people in, showing ourselves so that other people can see beyond just our Columbus, who we are, that there's a place for them, and that valid.
I'll just add, I think in my memory, I didn't think that coming out of the gate, calling it an International Drag King event, I didn't come up with that term extravaganza. One of our kings, David, had that idea. But from my perspective, international, as long as we got at least one person from Canada, then we were legit. And because that made us international, and we did, and we got actually quite a few people that came down across the border from Canada, and then it just grew from there. So it didn't feel to me, and again, Heidi was definitely kind of like trying to rein us in, but I think once we sat down, my memory of it was sitting down at Donna's table when it was still warm, and writing out a proposal for something we wanted to do in October. And we had to choose our date based around Ohio State football. Heidi was very much like, if you want to do this, you have to tell me how and why. And I think it was a good challenge because it forced us to sit down and rationalize how all of this could come to be. But I remember some of the things in my mind were like, look, you can drive to Columbus from 8 hours in any direction. There are so many cities that are 8 hours from Columbus or 9 hours from Columbus, and it made us very accessible as a city from over half of the continent. So it didn't feel to me like reaching too far. I certainly spent some long nights in that summer trying to get ready, but we still have that proposal. It's online, and I still have print copies of it. And we were very intentional about stating what and how we were going to do, what we were going to do, and why. And I think that says it all. So when that gets in the archives, I think that'll speak to the intentionality behind the event.
And the part about the extravaganzas, Samira's David Kingston, and I had gone to, I don't think they do it anymore. Just that everything, it's like the largest flea market you ever saw at the Ohio State Fairgrounds, and it's called the Extravaganza.
Yes.
And there's everything there, like everything. If you want it, you could find it there. And so, like, and talking with that, that's what because, it was kind of like conference. Well, okay. For those of us that were academic, that was great. But for the other people, why would that be so great? And so calling it an extravaganza allowed us to bring in these other components and it suggested that it was bigger than what you could imagine. And for me, extravaganza means everything goes. Like it means that you could go over the top, which was the part that Heidi didn't like so much. Especially when we started talking about the conference. And then I was like, well, what are people going to do after the conference? Because I'd been to so many conferences, and when the conference is over at the end of the day, you're bored to tears. So when I was like, well, we could have shows, and Heidi's like, wait a minute, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, but it could bring the money back in to trying to do this thing that we wanted to do. So I absolutely thought it was the best idea ever that we had to do a proposal. And I think we were all surprised by what we came up with. It was April, by the way. It was April when we met, and we decided on October, which was extremely insane. And this was way before social media was really a thing. I mean, MySpace was the hot up and coming social platform, and we weren't even doing that very well. It was all phone calls. Like I've run across, it's just like all phone calls, and someone would sit and try and find. I can remember spending a day trying to find different places to send out our hand-drawn flyers, a copy of our hand-drawn flyers. Yeah, out there. It was a very what do they call it? Low budget.
Mm-hmm.
Low
So-
budget operation.
No budget. It was a no budget.
Yeah,
event.
no budget.
Spent a lot
Well,
of time in Kinko's.
we
using our
we
money.
spent a lot of time in the OSU Women's Studies Xerox room is where we spent.
Who did that?
They sponsored in kind and didn't know it.
And was that in 1999? I think, Heidi, you said that's the thing behind you is from the first. Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to have, so I'm an artist, in addition to a performance artist, a visual artist, and I was like, oh, I want everybody to have something really cool to take with them. I mean, there's lots of cool things, but I'm like, ooh, wouldn't it be neat if I might get arrested, but I'm going to make an ID that looks like the Ohio driver's license. And so I did design this. That's why I made it my background. But it has the dates. And in the beginning, it was really, we were drag kings. Like it wasn't about community yet. It was really just really for drag kings. And so on this, it's our tagline was, where the best looking boys just happen to be girls. So that's how we started out. And of course, as we talk through this today, you'll know that it turned into something more of community. But in the beginning, it really was just about drag king. And there were some sticky issues about who's allowed to perform and which event, etc.
I mean, you had to have a king centered in the very beginning. Like a king had to be centered because we are also here in Columbus, Ohio, where drag queens reign supreme. And we had some experiences of being disrespected. You would never call a drag queen he on stage unless you were disrespecting them. And we'd had some incidences like that. We'd gone to New York and not been treated well, which in my mind I feel like that's what was the Kickstarter for Julie and Donna, that it came out of those conversations because just call us Midwesterners, I guess. We want to be nice. We want everybody to come bring their covered dish and sit at the table and eat. We did not understand. We purposefully put our stuff together so it wasn't a competition. And we purposefully challenged each other so that, there were all kinds of representation of masculinity across musical genres, across cultural genres, all of that. And then we would push each other. It wouldn't be as simple as, oh, well, I'm going to be this pimp. Oh, are you going to be this pimp? Well, what does that mean? And what are you saying in the context of that? And how are you going to term that stereotype on its, we are very much women's studies.
Yeah. I mean, I would
well,
say that I think it was maybe it was Midwestern. Also, I would say it was feminist, right? And not that everyone involved identified as a feminist, but we were very, very clear about wanting this to be collective and not competitive. And we wanted we wanted exactly that. I mean, I think, you know, everything else until then was really talking about single performers. Sometimes you'd see a duet. We often performed as a group, and actually, like, that's what I think we like doing the best. I mean, hey, let's have, you know, Lascivious is going to be Marilyn Monroe, and we're going to do Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and the rest, you know, because I think we found a set of tuxedos at the thrift store. You know what I mean? I mean, most of us were living check to check. We didn't have a lot of money, so often an outfit that was on sale really motivated a number. And I agree. I think, Lester, I agree that we were also trying to engage with a lot of different generations, right? So, you know, Jackson, what was Reardon was, you know, would do these like old timey numbers that probably like our parents or grandparents would have listened to, you know, and then of course, like Maxwell would bring, you know, Maxwell, and, you know, Baby T would, you know, they'd bring kind of the most recent hip hop, whatever. Yeah. I mean, I think it was really a kind of.
And the country.
Yeah.
Do not forget the country and the Western.
That's true.
Shawnee, I see you popped something in the chat here. What, can you talk about that?
Yeah, we're talking about that New York trip. I mean, wow. But yeah, I remember the hostility. And, you know, I think at one point, and I can't remember who said this, but at one point, one of the bartenders was like, they're not throwing anything or booing at you, so you guys are doing great. But they weren't really engaging either. Well, the number I had done, because it was my staple number at the moment, was Montel Jordan's This Is How We Do It, but it's all about the West Side. Well, I'm just like, this is just my number. That's what I'm doing. So I did that, but then, yeah, a lot of hostility, because because on the East Coast, you don't do West Side numbers. And I'm like, I'm from Ohio. What do I, it's like, this is just my number. But I remember like getting a tip, and one of the patrons there, like, pulled down my binding and exposed, my cleavage, which is like, I mean, that's a huge disrespect, especially in the King community. That's just like, wow. And I mean, I was pissed.
Johnny, do you remember that? I remember the hostility coming from the New York performers. I don't remember hostility coming from the audience. I think the audience was having a really good time, and that's what made their New York performers concerned.
The person who did this was part of the crew,
the person who did that was Moby Dick.
No, it wasn't. Moby was an instigator, but I remember it was a black woman. It was a black woman with short curly hair, but she was in tight with Moby and that crew. They were all kind of standing in the back, kind of smirking and just not being very nice.
So let me just clarify. So this New York, was this part of the IDKE? No. So that was, his
prior.
That was his Kings. Yeah. Okay.
That was our first big trip, wasn't it?
Okay. Like so we talked about that, I think, with the King's Court webinar. Yeah. Yeah. So let me just kind of shift you a little bit forward then, and let's kind of get into the IDKE mode so that I can understand it and our viewers can understand it more. How long did it stay in Columbus, and then it started to branch out and become hosted in other places? Is that, I'm getting a 4 and a 5 or 4?
Yeah, 4.
4, because 5 was in Minneapolis.
Okay, because the 6 was in Chicago.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So 4 years at home, and then we had people they bid for. By this time we had, there's a steering committee, the IDK steering committee comes in right before that. And then people bid we sort of had a manual of sorts that folks could look at and see what it all entailed. And then we had people more or less bid for it or say, we would like to bring it to our city. And then we I think that was kind of presented to, like, we would even have a big IDK meeting where we invite everybody in to sort of talk about the state of the union of what we were doing in a way, you know, like we were very much about what more about this? How does this community build
called town
itself?
halls. Yeah,
Yeah.
called town halls. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Minneapolis proved to be the most ready. And so we passed it to Minneapolis.
So let me understand then, you started the IDKE with primarily performers that were based in Columbus. Is that?
Yeah,
And
we were like the home team.
and then more performers started coming from farther away places, is that correct?
I mean, even at that first one, there were people. I mean, like you see, Melanie Corns just said that. I mean, that first one, she was in Santa Barbara. There was a whole crew from Santa Barbara that flew here. Yeah, and
That first one, I believe there were 22 different states represented in Canada, and someone had come from
like Japan, right?
Japan. Yeah, someone had come from
Australia. That maybe wasn't the first
in
one.
Australia.
Sexy Galaxy. God, Jess loves
Yeah.
Sexy Galaxy.
And that
Don't forget
Mr.
when Toronto came. I mean,
Toronto was the first
Oh,
year.
Toronto showed out. Yeah.
yeah, and we were like, oh, who are you? I mean, we're so excited to meet people, right? So many different performers. And that's what
We had no idea. They started rolling in that night. We were ill prepared, you know, because again, we didn't really have, snail mail doesn't move like that. You know, maybe you had an answer machine, maybe you didn't. We had no idea that many people, 700 people ended up attending that weekend to everything.
Wow. So how did you publicize that to get it to that far out?
Julie.
Well, we did. I mean, we posted to listservs. Listservs were a new, I don't know, a predecessor to social media. And so there were listservs popping up around lesbians, drag kings. I put something in the chat. I remember, you know, we created hard copy flyers and we mailed them. You know, before the wide use of the internet, people could still find each other. You just had to use phone books and things like that and directories. And so we went through the directories of LGBT bars all around the country. I remember being in Washington, D.C. that summer at a swim meet and dropping off flyers at a bookstore in, what's that neighborhood in DC called? DuPont Circle. DuPont, I just remember like going into this gay bookstore and being like, well, I don't really know exactly what to do this. Let me stick it on the bulletin board. And sure enough, we got Kings from DC that very first year.
Yeah, we sent them to, I mean, basically any feminist or gay bookstore we sent them to. Yeah.
And there were many of those at that time, right? Like, you know, before Amazon came around and did what it did, there were bookstores and coffee shops and that were all over the country. And so we just stuff and fold, put in the mailbox, sent that stuff out.
And I was working for Student Affairs, and the newly formed LGBT College and University Consortium had been formed. So I was able to post stuff to that as well, and that also allowed. And then we gave people suggestions. You know, if you're in a club, your Student Affairs probably has some money you could use for traveling. We used our resources, you know, and that's how we were able to do what we were doing. Most of our rooms were gotten for us by other people who were part of clubs or groups that they could get a room for free from the university, and then they got their name listed as a sponsor because they got us the room. They got us the room.
I thought that's funny, Lester. I remembered it as you got us all those rooms because you worked in campus life or student affairs.
Well, I did it by going to student groups.
Got it.
I went to student groups and was like, hey, so we're doing this, and can you help? We don't have any money. I don't need you to have money, But could
Right.
you rent these 3 cameras over
Yep, and I was
here?
just gonna say, we also rented a bunch of like old school cameras. You put a full VHS tape in. Oh yeah, I was like, the historian in me was like, oh, we're gonna record this shit. We probably won't be able
Yeah.
to watch it in 10 years, but we're gonna record it all. So that's what I want to. That's what I want to donate to you all, because there's no point in sitting in my closet for here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, that's exciting. Hey, Jen Rose, were you at that the first IDKE?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
What do you remember from the audience point of view?
Well, I remember when you start talking about cameras, at Woody's, where there was a dragdom maybe, and some there was a camera where people could come and talk and like introduce themselves. I'm here from
The
wherever.
confessional.
A confessional. And I was there. My nibblings had just been born. They were 3 months old, and we brought them, and we put them in little tuxedo onesies, and we joked that they were the youngest drag kings at the conference, and they slept through the whole thing. But I was just thinking about that, because I was like, what? I wonder whatever happened to the tape of that confessional or whatever it was, because that was kind of brilliant, you know. I was just thinking about all the different ways that people engage the audience, I guess.
Beth, can I bring up just something that I think is an important part of the IDKE legacy,
Please.
if you will? So we started out and created this event in Columbus, and you know, the first one was huge, a huge success, life changer for so many people. We knew we wanted to do it again, but pretty quickly we talked about it going on the road, and I think that's something also that was unique and special about what we did, because we wanted to put a framework around it, but we weren't trying to own it for the end of time. You know, it was kind of like, for me, following a model of international gay and lesbian sport, where, you know, the big events or even the annual events, they move, you know, so that you're bringing together a lot of the same people every year, but you have a different host each time. And that gives the opportunity for the event to evolve and change and take on a character that was reflective of whatever community it was in. And I think personally, I think that was a really special thing that we chose, again, very intentionally to do, so that it wasn't something that His Kings was owning. It became, in another way, a child of our community.
And
And
I'll just add that it was really important to us that whoever took it on understood the spirit of it, and that I mean, after 4 years, we got really good at it, and we were like, well, I don't want to go to it in a different city and it to suck, right? It needs to live up to its name and then continue to evolve with the community. And it did, but that's why there were the town halls, and we had a whole manual around like, what does it need? And there was a bidding process. We took it really seriously. We were very proud of it. And I'm proud of the fact that it was a consistent experience, and it evolved with the times and the communities and how the communities changed. At least through 11 of them, I believe. How many? I don't remember how many there were
I
after.
think 13.
10 came back, but I
Oh.
don't remember how many after that.
Why do I think there were 16?
No, I think it was 13. I mean, the other thing to know is that there were different parts to it, right? So there was the Friday night was Dragdom, and that was sort of like drag karaoke, right? Anyone could come with music. You just get up, and that was at this bar in the basement of the student union, which does not look like that anymore.
It's kind of like the opener.
Yeah, so that was the opener. And then on Saturday was all day was the conference. And so the conference was some like legit traditional academic papers where people were just like reading papers. Other people kind of was more conversations or panel discussions. We had a couple things that didn't really fit into a traditional academic like conference. And so those were performances, more theater performances. So then we had a brunch on Sunday, and those theatrical performances that weren't quite drag numbers, but like one was like a retelling of Shakespeare. So we put that at the Sunday brunch, right? And we also had, you could go in and out of, I think we called it the science fair, because it was sort of like, how do you, bind, and how do you make bulges, and, and you can use gel, and you can use socks. And so there were people teaching each other, right? There was kind of a sharing of information, and people were selling ties and shit, and so those were all in response to what the community asked for, or what the community presented us with. And I don't know if I think Dragdom was always a piece. I think the big performance on Saturday night was always a piece. The academic conference was always a piece. The brunch was always a piece. I don't know if the science fair necessarily always stayed. And I don't know if the like brunch I think sometimes brunches were like more like spoken word, or, you know what I mean? It was just, yeah. So again, I think it's important to remember that there are these kind of, I mean, when we got those proposals for this like retelling of a Shakespeare play, we were like, WTF, like, what are we going to do with this, right? This is not what we do, right? But guess what? Ohio State had this person, Leslie Ferris, who literally wrote the book on it, on gender performance. And so we're like, hey, will you come and give a talk, to a bunch of people from across the country who don't know anything about what you talk about? And it was great because it gave us a history, right? We all thought we thought of it ourselves, right? Like there was nothing before us, and that happened about every 10 years, right? Like, people would think that they invented things and we'd be like, yeah, we've been doing that for decades. So yeah, I mean, it was really kind of great that I think at first I was like, I don't know what the hell to do with this. And then we got creative, and I'm glad we did.
Well, I must tell you, I'm still very much close and in touch with Leslie Ferris, even though she is now back in London. So I will let her know that we were talking about her on this webinar.
That first one, Chase and I can't remember her name, but they actually came to Columbus and stayed. Raquel, yeah, actually came to Columbus and stayed with me for a week, and during that time we went over everything that we had shared with them to be able to do this conference. And then a couple of us went early to just try and help them. And I forget who, there were people that went and helped Chicago. Every time there were folks that actually stayed close contact with the producers to try and help them maintain everything they needed to maintain for IDKE. I think sometimes the science fair fell out because it was hard for people, to say, look, this is sustainable. Look, we can, you can launch your business here. You can do your book here. You can do something that can take care of you for the rest of your life through here. Look at all of these different avenues. I think that sometimes got lost on folks. They just couldn't see that as a real thing, the fashion, just all of, we were just entering really into recycle, reuse, so all of those were things that people were like, oh, hippies used to do that, and then it came back around. But a lot of the time we're right on the edge of whatever was about to hit. We seem to be there.
Well, let me ask you, because I know we're going to run out of time before I know it, but let me ask you to think about some favorite memories or some favorite stories that you'd like to share, or anything else that we haven't touched on that you might want to throw in here. Shawnee, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. Yeah. I actually have a couple things. So yeah, I talked about how I totaled my car. I think I got like a mile away. I was still downtown.
You might want to say that out. Oh, there we go. Yeah, because it was in the chat, and I don't know if the chat will be picked up. So go ahead and tell them what it was.
We're talking about how it was so life-changing. I was in such a daze leaving brunch that Sunday, like everybody, like we had just met. We were about to, me and my partner at the time were about to move to Chicago, about to move to Illinois. So we just met some friends there so we can have no people when we got there. And it was the most amazing life-altering thing. I had never experienced anything like that. And so I'm driving and I think I miss a light or I don't see anything else. I don't know. All I know is I totaled my car. And yeah, as Heidi pointed out that she remembered seeing me walking down the street with my license plate in my hand because I had custom plates. So yeah, so it's still with me. Usually I have it hanging up. So yeah. And just one more point, because there's so many things, but the science fair, one of the things I want to say about the science fair was that was one of my favorite things, especially since I wasn't so much in the academic space at that point. I was more in like the social aspect of it, but the science fair, like I taught masculinity and how to bind. That was my thing. And there was people who like taught, you know, different ways to show facial hair, 5 o'clock shadows, crepe paper, all that kind of stuff. And that was one of the most amazing things to kind of see people just milling around and learning something new, you know. It's like at the time it was ace bandages and duct tape. But, you know, we had found out, learning from other people, that it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to be tortured to be a drag king. Like, you know, there's different ways to sculpt and shape. And so there were so many different things that we learned in that science fair. And that was just like, I mean, that was just such a fun part of it for me. And the keynote speakers were always amazing. And that was, I mean, I just kept thinking like, how this little, you know, ragtag group of weirdos who like to lip sync and, you know, and dress and drag, and we pulled this thing off. So it's absolutely, it's just, it's still a fond memory, all of them.
Mine is being at Lifestyles, like at the pavilion. For me, that was a pinnacle for what we did. I don't know, just that we were able to bring into this city the number of people we did to feel a real life music venue blew my mind. And we put 197 people that night on stage with very little hitches. And it, to me, like it just kind of made our mark. We could have never imagined way back when we were sneaking people in the back door of Summit Station, that we would actually have tickets that folks could go to the ticket box and get to come and see what had come out of our minds. And so for me, that is like there are so many memories. I love the science fair of all things, because there would just be so many amazing things that people would come up with. And I like to talk to people. And so it gave folks an opportunity, that and as part of the science fair, if you were hungry, there was always food there that nobody said anything about. It might have just been peanut butter and jelly and maybe some bean soup or crackers or whatever, but no one starved, and everybody was so generous. You know, if you didn't have a place to stay, you know, I've had people all over my house that had just shown up, not even knowing what they were going to show up for. And then, like, you know, didn't have the money to stay in a hotel or whatever. And the generosity of the community to come forward and do that, that for me is what I take away from IDKE.
I can add on to so performing at Promo West Pavilion, that was our 10-year anniversary when IDKE actually came back to Columbus. And we had since then broken up, as I believe that's what happened. There was tension in the community about performing, and it was a big deal we had about, I don't know, 18 people in that number, but they were from different troops in Columbus. We weren't one troop anymore. We weren't His Kings anymore. And a lot of our performers didn't get along anymore. And it was the one way at that time we could bring everyone together for a common focus and build community back up with each other by performing in this number together. So that for me was my favorite part of being on that stage.
What number was that?
We called it the Midwest Side Story.
Yeah.
It was a reenactment of West Side Story. We called it the Midwest Side Story. But again, behind the scenes of that number was all of the tension and turmoil that we literally had with each other. And I think we worked on that performance for like 3 months together. So that was a big deal. I also, talking about community, because over time, IDK turned from a drag king event into a community event, because there were a lot of other groups of people struggling with identity, trying to find their place and be their authentic self on stage to explore who they were. And we acquiesced over time. I don't remember which IDK it was, where we actually put a little C in it. So it was IDKCE, the Drag King Community Extravaganza. And so some people that stand out for me were taking a workshop with Kate Bornstein. And Kate Bornstein, one of my favorite people on the planet. I still have a signed card, my Get Out of Hell free card, which says on the back, it's basically Kate's, it's her business card that says, if you ever need me, here's my phone number. And taking up a theater workshop with Laszlo Perlman here in Columbus as well. Like those amazing performance and identity people on the planet came to IDKE. So.
I have a good memory, and I have a not so good memory. I'll start with the not so good so we can end on a high note. What ultimately really took me away, like ultimately made me stop wanting to be a part of the IDKE community, was the racism of the community. From pretty early on, pretty much every year, some white performer would perform in blackface, and it would either be literally in blackface, like Al Jolson, like blackened face, or just kind of an exaggeration and a really kind of like monolithic, one-dimensional performance of Black masculinity by white performers. And like I said, you know, a lot of us were reading the theory, and I didn't have this language then, but for me, I wanted IDKE to be an anti-racist space. I didn't have that language then. I wanted to be, you know, homophobia and like sexism was probably something that most, you know, I mean, we really need to work with trans folk. I feel like there was some real transphobia, probably some ableism, that kind of stuff. But for me, the racism, it was the fact that I'll speak for myself, the fact that I wanted this to be a political space. I wanted this to be a transformative space. I wanted this to be a space where we made change, literally, capital C, change in the world. And for a lot of people, that was not what the space was. They wanted to come and have fun and probably get laid. And they didn't want to hear about my concerns about their racism. And it just, I remember, I don't know what year it was. I don't remember where it was, but I remember just leaving one of the town halls, just crying and just saying to myself, I remember calling my partner and being like, I can't do this anymore. It has become something that I do not want to be a part of. You know, where people they made the decision that they just wanted to have fun and they didn't want it to be a political space. And I wasn't in leadership then. So I was like, okay, then it's not my space anymore. So that broke my heart. That broke my heart, and really ultimately is why I kind of like pulled that. And like, you know, I was trying to get a PhD, I was trying to get pregnant, we were trying to buy a house. I mean, like I had just like kind of other things were pulling my attention. So that's the hard memory. The funny, great memory, there's so many, but this is the one that popped in my head when you asked the question was, so maybe Mel can say in the chat, I can't remember what the name, was it the Disposable Boy? I don't know. It was Kentucky Fried Woman, right? That's the performer. And they're like, hey, we've got this number. Are there any like requirements? Is there anything we can't do on stage? And I remember us being like, I mean, you know, within reason, I think it's fine. And they did a number, I believe, to pour some sugar on me. And all I remember is there was honey involved and water involved. And the stage, I remember Aaron was like, who was our stage manager, is like, how the F will I clean this up in between, right? Does anyone remember what that number was? A lot of glitter sugar. Yeah, it was pour some. Yeah, pour some sugar on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being like, holy shit, this is it. You know what I mean? That to me felt like this is what we've helped create. So that was,
and they were rocking fat feminism then.
Yep,
so they like really nobody had seen that. I mean, these big, voluptuous, curvy people got on stage and did that number. It was fantastic, but yeah, we had to put in some more rules.
I think after that, we're like, no honey, no water, no glitter.
Yeah, I remember that because I remember falling in love with mocha latte love. I was like, oh my God. That number is just there's so many numbers that defied. I mean, they were beyond creative. It was amazing. It was so amazing.
I'll say from the first IDKE, I was in the DJ box. And from that vantage point, watching some of these numbers, like Shawnee's mentioning, particularly Dread from New York, who did this whole thing of masculinity, femininity on stage, and culminated that number by pulling an apple out of their pants and taking a bite of it. And I just remember practically falling over in the DJ booth, just being like, whoa, like we were good. I mean, his Kings were good. We had so much creativity and so much talent, but then to see all these people from all over the continent of North America coming with their own interpretations and just really, I don't know. I mean, for me as watching, because I wasn't performing then, it felt like an affirmation and a challenge all at once. Like, look, there's so much more that can be done. And we're doing these amazing things. And now look at this community we've created where we can all learn from each other. And I mean, it, like Donna said, it wasn't all like roses and hand holding, but I do think that spirit of community really, it was powerful.
Even in the hard conversations, I do believe that people walked away thinking about things they had never thought of before, and it did transform them in some way. So yeah, there were some hard conversations, but at least there was space to have them.
Mhm.
That's a great point. We are coming down to the wire. Are there final thoughts that anyone would like to share before we sign off?
You know, I like to give a shout out to the artists. I can't remember, Lester, you may remember her name, who did our logo, the crown. So we had some artists that kind of like, you know, pro bono stuff. And then this was this was the budding of my design career. So like, you know, I created the Drag King, and most of that was my contribution, was the material, a lot of the materials, the art, the
Anderson?
Huh?
Anderson?
No, I know who you're talking about though, but no. But yeah, that was because that's kind of how I became to be a founder. Was like, I was working in a graphics company. I was like, you know what, I'll steal some paper, I'll steal some ink. I'm learning graphic design. I got much better at it because that was like my first go. But we had actually a lot of artists, you know, who kind of helped us out with you know, designing the shirts, you know, the all that great stuff. So we had some really great people, you know, inside of King's Court and outside, who were just part of the community that really chipped in.
I would add to that, we did that in the Midwest, not New York, not in LA, not in San Francisco. We did it in Columbus, motherfucking Ohio. And you cannot take that away from us. So, I mean, for me, that's why I wrote my dissertation about this, is that I want, and I'm sorry, y'all, I haven't gotten it published yet. I don't know if it's ever going to get published, but I mean, I interviewed people in Columbus, people in Minnesota, and people in Chicago, because I wanted to track that diaspora, and I wanted people to understand that this is not the flyover zone, right? That there was critical, exciting, sexy work, queer work being done in all those places, and that there always has been, and there always will be.
Mhm.
And just the amount of work that's out there that we don't even totally know about. I often run into people when I'm out at conferences that are like, hey, did you ever? And I'd be like, yeah. And they have written books, they have made films, they have done art projects, they have done all, I mean, at the University of, so I don't know if it's Austria University or the University of something in Austria, but there are 5 articles that you can find about IDKE. You know, to me, what?
Yeah.
Like, really? Are you like for real? You know, like, we really pushed and put a mark on this idea of gender. I really believe that we were a huge catalyst for what follows, especially written from non-traditional voices, you know, and I do, that is one of my dreams, that one day, like, all of those pieces of things that were done, all of that, there's tons of music actually publish music that comes out of people's experiences with IDKE. And it would just be awesome to see all the papers and all of the work that came out of our little baby. You know,
Well, I am so sorry that we have to end here. You guys are so much fun to listen to, and we'll just have to set up some more down the road. But please, just take my gratitude and thank you so much for being willing to give your time and your stories and your love to this project. And now we have something else that these folks who want to study His Kings, the King's Court, and the IDKE can turn to with these webinars, and also with the growing archive that we have. So again, thank you all very much. This has been a delight, and I look forward to the next time. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
guys.
Hi, everyone.